Today we're talking about these things right here in College Football 25. This is called a development trait, and every single player has one of these in College Football 25. It determines the rate at which a player will improve in the video game, and there are 4 different development traits: normal, impact, star, and elite. So this right here is the normal development trait. You can see it says develops at a normal rate. So this is just the normal default rate a player develops, and most of the players will have this development trait. The development trait right above normal is impact. So you can see it says develops at a faster than normal rate. So this is one step above normal. And some players will have this. This is still pretty common to find. It's not as common though as normal. Then we have the star development trait, which is a step above impact. So it says develops faster than impact rate. And this one is where you get to the point where it's pretty uncommon to find a player with this development trait. And lastly, we have elite, which is the best, develops at the fastest rate. This is very uncommon to find in players, but if they do have this development trait, they're basically guaranteed to be an absolute dog in College Football 25. Yes, overall is important, abilities are important, stars are important, but I would argue the most important thing is their development trait. You can find like a 2 or 3 star with a star or elite development trait, which is going to end up being in the long run better than like a 4 star with a normal development trait. So at first, yes, maybe that 4 or 5 star is better than that 2 or 3 star, but by the time they're juniors and seniors, that 2 or 3 star might have developed much better than that 4 or 5 star, and now they're a higher overall than those other players. Obviously, the best combination is finding a 5 star with an elite development trait because they're going to be a pretty high overall to begin with, plus they will develop very, very quickly. When you are recruiting, you cannot find out the player's development trait unless you have the mind reader ability in the strategist archetype. So that ability is extremely helpful, and we're going to go over that in just a second. But paying attention to the development trait of players is still very important in other parts of Dynasty mode, especially when you're encouraging players to transfer. Obviously, you normally encourage players to transfer that are very low overall, which obviously you should still do. However, if you're looking at a guy that's like 60 overall with a star or elite development trait versus a guy that's like 63 overall with a normal development trait, I would definitely choose the guy with a normal development trait to encourage that guy to transfer. So you can see the strategist archetype right here in between recruiter and tactician. And to unlock this archetype, you have to win 4 bowl games. And when you get in here, you can see that all of the benefits to this archetype basically have to do with recruiting, and each ability is broken down into position groups. This ability right here is specifically for the secondary. You can see tier 4 at the bottom is mind reader and says increased chance to learn dev trait of DBs on visits. So you can't just simply scout the player and learn their development trait with this ability, and it's not even a guarantee that you find out what their development trait is. But if you do have this ability, when you schedule a visit with them and that visit takes place, there is a chance you will learn their development trait. So obviously I'm going to go ahead and purchase this ability, and then let's go back to recruiting and see if we can see it in action. So here we go. You can see that the development trait for Anton Dudley is showing up right there. He has an impact development trait. So I scheduled a visit with him. He went on that visit, and now this development trait is showing. He actually committed as well, but that's not the reason the development trait is showing up. They don't show up until they sign, I believe, and that's if you do not have the mind reader ability. And you can see the guy right below him, Steve Hand. His development trait is also showing up because he went on a visit and not because he committed, because he's obviously not committed. You can see it doesn't always work though, because this guy right here went on a visit and we do not know his development trait. So you can see how incredibly useful and important the mind reader ability is. It takes your recruiting to a whole nother level. If you can tell if guys are going to develop really well, then you know exactly who to target and recruit and get on your team. This is actually a great example right here because Dudley and Hand are both 4-star cornerbacks, but I definitely prefer Dudley over Hand because Dudley has an impact development trait, whereas Hand only has a normal development trait. Now I'm going to show you how a development trait actually affects a player's development. Tyler Wade, he is a 79 overall freshman. He is a 5-star, so he's like the best of the best. And let's fast forward to his senior year. Now you can see he's a 95 overall. So he went from a 79 overall to a 95 overall. And I think last year, his junior year, he was like a 90 overall or something. In one of my dynasties with MTSU, I grabbed a 4-star with an elite development trait. and he absolutely completely changed my program. He started around a 79-80 just like Tyler Wade here, and then his sophomore year he was all the way up to an 88 overall with 99 speed. I mean, just completely changed everything for MTSU. Here you can see Keenan Burdick is a freshman. He has a normal development trait and he is 76 overall. So the last guy we looked at had the best development trait. This guy has the worst or the default development trait. Fast forward to his senior year and he is an 83 overall. So you can see he only improved 7 overall points and is now sitting at an 83 as a senior. Andre Lambo, which is a pretty cool name. He definitely needs an NIL deal with Lamborghini, but he is a freshman with an impact development trait, which is the second worst or the third best, whichever way you want to look at it. Either way, it's one step up from normal development trait, and he is a 79 overall. Now his senior year, he is a 92 overall, so he had really good improvement as well, but he had a really weird jump from his freshman year to his sophomore year. He went from 79 to 88, and then he didn't improve at all from his sophomore year to his junior year. He stayed 88, and then he bumped up to 92 for his senior year. And this is a good example of how it's not an exact science. Like, just because you're elite development trait or star or normal or impact, whatever, it's still gonna vary some. So just because you have a certain development trait doesn't mean it's like guaranteed to be plus 15 by the time you're a senior. Lastly, here is a player with a star development trait. Freshman kicker, 67 overall, Matt Ginn. I only advanced 1 year. I didn't go all the way to this guy's senior year, but now he is a redshirt freshman and he is 77 overall, so he had a plus 10 jump. I imagine by the time this guy's a senior, he'll be well into the 90s. I think that gives you an overall good idea of how the development traits work in college football 25. They get better going from normal, impact, star, and all the way up to elite. Like I said, it's not an exact science. I had one guy that was a star that I was originally tracking for this video, and he went from like a 78, and the best he got his senior year was like an 83. So he clearly did not improve that much. But in general, players with the star and elite development traits usually end up being the best players on the team. They normally get to at least 90 overall. I have yet to see any elite player not get to 90 overall. So if you can unlock that mind reader ability, I definitely think it's worth it. But as I said earlier in the video, looking at the development trait is still very important and useful when telling players to enter the transfer portal or maybe even figuring out who to redshirt. But I actually really like the idea that it's hard to figure out the development traits of these players until they're signed to your team. EA actually directly addressed that. They were talking about how scouts and coaches say at the end of the day, you can tell like who is a pretty good player in high school, but you can't tell if they're going to develop into one of those elite players. It's kind of random. It's just if they have that it factor or not. So I think it's a really cool new factor that they added in college football 25. And one thing I actually meant to mention earlier, but I have heard a lot of people say that the busts and the gems normally correlate to if they have a better development trait or not. So if they're a bust, they might just have a normal development trait, whereas if they're a gem, they might have like a star or elite development trait. So that's also something to look out for. Thank you for watching this video. Follow me on Instagram at BringNCAA Follow me on Twitter or X at TubbyLight, and then subscribe here for more videos just like this one.